Hi and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Carly. I am a mom to a 21-month-old son named Leo, and I am 37 weeks pregnant with my second little boy. I cannot believe I'm already that far along. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I've been preparing for my hopeful VBAC, as well as natural tips and tricks I'm going to be using to try to induce labor here at home naturally. So let's get started talking about VBAC. So first of all, if you've not heard of a VBAC, VBAC stands for vaginal birth after cesarean. So obviously, since I'm trying to prepare for one, I have had a C-section in the past. My son Leo was born via C-section in August of 2020, and I am hopeful that I will be able to have a vaginal delivery this time around. I have a whole video about my C-section, which I'll link in the description box below, but essentially the reason that I needed a C-section is because I was induced with Leo at 40 weeks 4 days, and as the pitocin increased, and pitocin is the drug that they give you in inductions to stimulate contractions. It stimulates oxytocin, which is the hormone that your body releases to cause contractions. So as I received more pitocin, Leo's heart rate actually started decelerating. He wasn't tolerating the pitocin well, but then when they turned off the pitocin, my body wasn't continuing the labor naturally. It needed the pitocin to keep going. So we ended up having a C-section, and it was for the best for Leo's health, for my health. And I don't necessarily regret my C-section, but I definitely don't want to have another one. So the main reason I am hoping for a VBAC is because my husband Alec and I would like to have a bigger family. We're hopeful that we'll have at least 4, maybe more children. And the risks increase as the number of C-sections that you've had increases. A lot of doctors really don't recommend moms having more than 3 or 4 C-sections. And so I wouldn't like to have our family size limited just because of the method of delivery, that if I have to keep having C-sections and it becomes unsafe or risky because I've had too many, I'd really prefer to avoid that whole scenario by being able to birth all of my future children vaginally. So when I first found out that I was pregnant with this second baby, I knew immediately that I wanted a VBAC, and I've actually known that I wanted a VBAC for baby number 2 since I had my C-section with Leo. My mom actually had a VBAC with me, so I'm a VBAC baby. My older sibling was born via C-section, and I was born vaginally, and so she was with me when I had my C-section, which was such a blessing, knowing that somebody who had been through a C-section was with me. And she has been my biggest cheerleader and encouragement as I pursued a VBAC. So I knew from the moment I found out I was pregnant that I was going to be going for a VBAC. So once it was actually time to start thinking about the VBAC, I knew I needed to get educated. One thing that I learned as I started doing my research is that a lot of women are good candidates for VBACs, and a lot of women who have had C-sections in the past will be able to have a successful VBAC in the future. The main risk with VBAC is something called uterine rupture. So I have a scar on my uterus from my cesarean section where they opened up my uterus to pull out my son, and so there is about a 1 in 200 chance that a woman who has had a C-section will have a uterine rupture where her uterus will actually tear along that scar. But that is only about a 1 in 200 chance. So obviously it's not nothing, but I felt like the risks were pretty low. And other than that, I really felt like the benefits of a VBAC were much greater than the risks. So despite the risk of uterine rupture, I knew without a doubt that I wanted to try and have a VBAC. And I've never really considered myself much of like a crunchy mom or like a super natural kind of a mom. I had an epidural with Leo. I'm probably gonna have an epidural during this birth. So I've never really been the kind to want to have an unmedicated labor or have a home birth. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, they're just not for me. But what I have realized is that some of the like more crunchy mom type things actually are beneficial in pursuing a VBAC. And the main thing that I learned, and the main thing that has really marked my relationship with my provider, has been the need to ask questions and be satisfied with the answers. So during my first pregnancy, I really did trust my doctor. I had no reason not to. He had been delivering babies for 40 years. I was just pregnant for the first time. So I trusted him pretty much all the way up until the very, very end. And I don't necessarily regret that, but I do feel like I probably should and could have asked more questions about what was going on with my care. So that's what I've been doing this time around. Is there have been a couple of occasions this pregnancy where I felt like I wasn't quite sure about why my doctor was doing something or why we were pursuing specific routes. So I've been asking questions, and I'm not stopping if I am not sure about the answer. I'm asking for more clarification. I really want to make sure that I'm on the exact same page as my care team, so I don't end up in a situation where where I feel like I didn't understand the risks or the benefits of a certain thing, where I wasn't sure what was going on. I really have been focusing on asking questions and understanding answers. And when I don't understand answers, making sure that I keep asking those questions until I do understand. So that's one thing I've kind of taken from the like natural or crunchy approach to looking at a care provider, is just making sure that you're on the same page and that you're not just going, well, he's a doctor, she's a doctor, they're smarter than me, so I guess that what they say goes. And what they say may go. You know, I might end up doing something that I wasn't initially on board with that my doctor explains to me, but I want to make sure that I've received that explanation and I understand why we're doing something, and I'm not just saying yes just because they're a doctor, if that makes sense. And a resource that has been really helpful and wonderful for me has been a community called the VBAC Link. I discovered the VBAC Link through a friend who had a VBAC, and this is a podcast and also a Facebook group. And the podcast has been just so wonderful for me. It is a podcast for women to tell their stories of birth after cesarean. And now obviously most of these are VBACs. A few of them are actually C-section births after C-section from women who may have wanted VBACs. And so just hearing positive birth stories around birth after cesarean has been really, really helpful for me. I think that that's good advice for all pregnant women, is to surround yourself with positive birth stories. It will help kind of encourage and empower you to know that your body can do this. But for me, that specific angle of birth after cesarean has been really wonderful to hear. So I've been binging their podcast, and they also kind of talk about things like due dates or long labors or big babies or other kind of like birth topics related, and that's been really helpful as well for me. So I have absolutely loved the VBAC Link podcast. I haven't been as active in the Facebook community just because I haven't been as active on Facebook this year, but I've heard wonderful things about the community, and I know that if I need something, I bet I could go and find support there. Another source that I have really loved is Bridget Tyler on YouTube. I will link her channel in the description below, as well as the VBAC Link podcast. But Bridget is a birth doula and a childbirth educator. She has a whole VBAC video, but then she also talks about inducing labor at home or birth ball exercises. The birth ball has been amazing. I'll talk a little bit more about it later in the video. Bridget's channel has been a wonderful resource for me, and just kind of getting educated and getting prepared for the act of birth itself, because I feel like that's something I've been wanting to do more, is just like take a more active role in planning for this birth rather than sort of rolling with the punches like I did with Leo. I want to make sure that I'm in more control because I have a much different desired outcome than most do. So just getting educated and empowered for the birth itself has been a huge thing that I've been working on doing. Something that I've really had to come to terms with is just being okay with whatever happens. I'm kind of a control freak, so it's easy for me to want to try to control all of the pieces of this birth prep, knowing that, oh, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I will have a successful VBAC. So just for me, recognizing that childbirth isn't something you have necessarily full control over. Your baby has a lot to do with it. There are things that can go sideways and do go sideways all the time in birth, whether they're big things or small things. And so just kind of letting go of some of that control freakness and trying to be okay with whatever happens has been something I've been working on. And I had this tested a little bit ago. At 34 weeks, I went in for an ultrasound and we discovered that my son was breech. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, have I been doing all of this VBAC research just to end up with a C-section for a breech baby? But kind of coming to terms with the fact that, hey, maybe I will have a C-section because my baby is breech, and maybe there's nothing that I can do about that, but maybe that's going to be okay. That was actually a really like good lesson for me, and sure enough, at 36 weeks, he had flipped a head down, so we don't have to worry about a breech baby anymore, thank goodness. But it was a good lesson for me to just kind of let go of some of that control. Another thing that I really want to work on letting go of control of is the idea of being induced. I had an induction with my son, and I think that being induced before my body was ready was one of the reasons that I ended up with a C-section. But I also know that there might be a lot of things that could be a reason for induction between now and the birth of my baby, and to not see induction as the end of the world, but as another method of getting my son out if it is necessary for one or both of us to stay healthy. So I've been really working on reframing my view of induction and not seeing it as the enemy, because it's not a death sentence for a VBAC. Sure, it might make it a little bit more difficult. There are some methods of induction that are traditionally used that can't be used for VBAC births because it increases the risk of rupture. But if I do need to have an induction, then I have to have an induction, and we'll be okay. I will be okay, my son will be okay, and it doesn't rule me out of having to VBAC. So I'm really also trying to reframe my perspective around induction, and listening to positive induction stories on the VBAC Link podcast has actually been huge for that. So I feel a lot more at peace with the idea of an induction than I did before, but I'm still trying to avoid one, which is why I'm trying some techniques that I've learned from different places to try to get my labor going here at home. I forgot to say this when I filmed, so I'm saying it now. I'm 37 weeks pregnant, which is considered full term. Please do not try any of these things before 37 weeks pregnant, and please make all of your decisions in tandem with your care provider. I am not your care provider. I'm a random person on YouTube, so please talk to your doctor or midwife or provider before you do any of these things. My due date is coming up quickly, and I am ready to get this baby out of me. This pregnancy has been a lot more uncomfortable than my pregnancy with my son. I think it's because I'm a stay-at-home mom, and my son is relentlessly active, as I call it. So I've been in a lot more pain, and I'm just ready to get this baby out, and I want to meet my little boy. So here are a couple of things that I've been trying to get things going at home. So two of the more common ones are drinking red raspberry leaf tea and eating dates. So I've been drinking red raspberry leaf tea at least 1 cup a day my whole 3rd trimester, and now I'm up to like 3 or 4 cups a day. I have this cup right here which holds 24 ounces, which is 3 cups. So I've been trying to drink at least one of those of red raspberry leaf tea a day. I just used this red raspberry leaf tea that I bought on Amazon, and I made a big pitcher of iced tea out of it. And red raspberry leaf tea is supposed to help to tone your uterus and get your cervix to ripen and become more favorable for labor. So I've been chugging red raspberry leaf tea. I've also been eating dates. I know dates kind of have mixed reviews from some moms about the taste. I have a sweet tooth, so I don't necessarily mind dates, although I don't love them. And I've been trying to eat at least 2 a day. You're supposed to eat like 6 a day, but dates are actually very expensive, so I haven't been relying on dates as much, but if I do go past my due date, I can see myself wanting to really ramp up the dates. In addition to eating things, I've also been trying a few physical things. First is, I mentioned that I've been learning about using my birth ball, and so I have been doing birth ball exercises. Like I mentioned, I've been in a good amount of pain this pregnancy in my pelvis and lower back, and the birth ball has actually helped me release a lot of that pain. The 2 exercises I do a lot are pelvic tilts and figure 8s. And these 2 exercises not only help with my pain and comfort level, but they also help to open up my pelvis to help my baby descend. So I've been trying to sit on my birth ball anytime that I'm sitting, to just sit on the ball instead of in a chair or whatever, as well as doing things like sitting forwards, not reclining so much. These things are supposed to help my baby descend and rest his head on my cervix to hopefully kind of get contractions going. Another thing that I have been trying is some of the exercises from spinning babies. I started doing this when my baby was breech, and the one that I was doing in particular was the forward leaning inversion, and I don't know if that helped him flip, but I did that a lot in those 2 weeks when I wasn't sure if he was breech or head down, and then when they checked me again, he was head down, so I'm not sure if that's what did it. But again, it's just supposed to help with ideal positioning for labor to help your baby come in the right spot. There's another thing called the Miles circuit, which I will link to in the description box below. I don't know a lot about it because I haven't tried it, because you're supposed to do these 3 exercises for 30 minutes each, so it's like a 90-minute thing, and honestly right now I do not have 90 minutes, but if I go past my due date, I am going to tell my husband to take my son out of the house so I can try this, because supposedly it can work for people. So we'll see about that. The other thing that I have not tried yet is nipple stimulation. So nipple stimulation releases oxytocin, which can help begin contractions. It's really common for women to pump, and what's great about that is not only does it stimulate the nipples, but also you can collect colostrum, which is that liquid gold early milk before your like milk comes in. And colostrum is full of nutrients and super good, not just for newborn babies, but for even older babies. So you can collect colostrum as well as stimulating the nipples to try to get oxytocin going. And obviously sex is another option, but I won't get too into that on this channel. And then the last thing I've been working on is doing a little bit of fear releasing, or kind of like mental work. As I reflect on my pregnancy and labor and delivery with my son Leo, I'm definitely recognizing that there were a couple of experiences that I had that have just left me fearful that my body can't do this, that I'm not going to go into labor on my own, alone, or that I'm not going to be able to dilate far enough, or that I'm not going to be able to push out my baby. And those fears not only are hard to carry around, just like from a mental perspective, but also from an evolutionary perspective. A woman won't go into labor if she doesn't feel safe and vulnerable. And carrying around a mental load of fear actually prevents your body or keeps you tensed up, and will prevent you from going into labor. Or it might make labor stall if it starts. And so one of the things I've really been working on is taking my fears about my body and about delivery to prayer, and praying through scripture verses that speak to the design of a woman's body and speak to labor and speak to the way that we are made good by God. But you don't have to be a Christian or pray with the Bible to do fear releasing. I've heard meditations and mantras and affirmations are all really helpful for fear releasing. So I've been really trying to work through some of those fears, not only as a labor inducing or labor stimulating technique, but also just because it's good to work through our fears and good to work through those little traumas in our life. And I don't need to be carrying that stuff around, because I do know that God made my body good to deliver my son, and that I will be able to do it. So I'm going to leave a couple scripture verses. If you are a Christian or a Catholic and you want to pray through your birth, I have a few scripture verses I've been praying with that I will leave in the description box below. So that is my video about how I am preparing for my hopeful VBAC, as well as how I am planning on trying to help labor get started here at home naturally. And I am just so excited to embark on the journey of birth. I don't think I was scared of birth when I was pregnant with Leo, but I don't think I was as excited as I am now to actually experience labor and delivery again. And I'm just really praying and hoping that everything goes the way I want, knowing that even if it doesn't, I've done everything I can to try to get prepared and to try to give myself the best shot at a vaginal birth after cesarean. If you have had a VBAC, or you're interested in a VBAC, or you have any great tips or resources, please leave them in the comments below. One of the reasons I wanted to record this video is because I feel like there wasn't a lot of VBAC content, particularly about preparing to have a VBAC, from just regular moms. There was some content from childbirth educators and stuff, but just to hear regular moms talking about what they're doing to prepare for a VBAC, I feel like it's kind of not happening on YouTube. So that was why I wanted to film this video, or one of the reasons. And so if you have any tips, I would love it if you would leave them in the comments, so any moms who find this video who are hoping for a VBAC themselves will find lots of tips in the comments in addition to what I have to share. Also check the description box for links to my red raspberry leaf tea, to some of the resources I described, to some of those scripture verses as well. And if you enjoyed my content, please subscribe and hit that like button. I will be sharing a little bit about my baby boy when he is born, as well as my birth story, so I can't wait to get that shared with you. I also have a few more pregnancy videos, depending on how things go when he comes. I may or may not be putting out a couple more pregnancy related videos before he gets here as well. So if you hit that subscribe, then you'll make sure that you can be the first to see all of those videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.